Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The pain was not a sharp sting, but a tectonic shift that shattered the very foundation of his soul, tearing through the marrow of his bones the instant the teeth sank into the junction of his neck and shoulder. Rian, a rogue alpha who had never bowed to any king, god, or monster, threw his head back in a silent scream, his vocal cords paralyzed by the overwhelming flood of dominance crashing into his bloodstream. He didn't just feel the bite. He felt the biological imperative of his existence being rewritten, the proud, ironclad designation of alpha, dissolving like sugar in boiling water under the crushing weight of the predator holding him. This wasn't just a wound. This was an annihilation. The throne room of the obsidian spire was cold, smelling faintly of ozone and crushed velvet. It was a place where light went to die, swallowed by the high, vaulted ceilings and the oppressive aura of the man currently wiping a stray drop of blood from his lips. Duke Kalen Vance, the enigma of the North. He stood over Rian, his silhouette backlit by the pale, fractured moonlight streaming through the Gothic windows. Kalen was a creature of terrifying elegance. Tall, lean, and draped in a military coat of midnight blue that emphasized the unnatural broadness of his shoulders. His hair, the color of spun silver, fell over eyes that were not merely blue, but a glowing electric cyan that pierced through the darkness. Rian gasped, his knees colliding with the marble floor. The chains binding his wrists rattled, a harsh metallic dissonance in the silence. He was breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. His body, honed by years of guerrilla warfare in the wastelands, scarred and muscular, felt foreign. You! Rian grit his teeth, the word tearing from his throat. You didn't just bite me. Kalen looked down, his expression impassive, though a tremor of something indiscernible passed through his hand before he clenched it behind his back. No, Rian. I didn't. You marked me? Rian snarled, trying to struggle to his feet, but his limbs felt like lead. The spot on his neck burned with a hellish heat, pulsing in time with Kalen's own heartbeat. I am an alpha. You cannot mark an alpha. Kills us. It drives us into madness. It would kill a lesser alpha, Kalen corrected, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to vibrate against Rian's ribcage. But you are a rogue. Your genetics are feral, unrefined by the city's conditioning. You are the only thing strong enough to hold it. Hold what? Rian spat, finally forcing one knee up, glaring at the aristocrat with golden eyes that were rapidly dilating, fighting the physiological submission the mark was trying to enforce. Your ego. Kalen stepped closer. The scent coming off him was overwhelming, petrichor, freezing rain, and something darker, like ancient ink. It wasn't the sweet, cloying scent of an omega, nor the aggressive musk of an alpha. It was the scent of the void. It was the scent of an enigma, the apex predator of their hierarchy, the only gender capable of dominating an alpha. My curse, Kalen whispered. Before Rian could process the words, the room spun. The burning in his neck flared into a white-hot agony that raced down his spine. His vision tunneled. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the terrifyingly gentle way Kalen reached out to catch him, and the look in the enigma's eyes. It wasn't triumph. It was desperation. When Rian awoke, the cold stone of the throne room was gone. He was lying on a mattress that felt like a cloud, wrapped in sheets of silk that cost more than his entire mercenary company. He sat up, his hand flying instantly to his neck. A bandage was there, crisp and white, smelling of medicinal herbs. He ripped it off. In the reflection of a gilded mirror opposite the bed, he saw it. The mark. It wasn't the jagged, messy scar of a battlefield wound. It was intricate, a perfect set of teeth marks that had already begun to scar over in a darkly elegant pattern, surrounded by bruised skin that looked like a nebulous galaxy. But it was what he felt that terrified him. The aggressive, restless energy that usually buzzed under his skin, the alpha drive to conquer, to fight, to lead, was quiet, dampened. In its place was a tether, a thick, invisible chain connecting his solar plexus to something elsewhere in the castle. He could feel him. He could feel Kalen's location, Kalen's emotional state. A cold, brooding storm of anxiety and pain. Why? Rian whispered to the empty room. The door creaked open. It wasn't a servant. It was Kalen carrying a tray of food. He had discarded his military coat, wearing only a loose white shirt and dark trousers. He looked tired. The devastating beauty of his face was marred by dark circles under his eyes. "You're awake," Kalen said softly, setting the tray on a bedside table. "Eat. You need the calories to synthesize the bond." Rian lunged. It was instinct. He was a prisoner and this was his captor. He moved with the speed of a striking viper, his hand closing around Kalen's throat, slamming the Enigma against the wall. "Undo it," Rian growled, his face inches from Kalen's. "I don't care if you're the Duke. I don't care if you're an Enigma. Undo this mark or I will tear your throat out." Kalen didn't fight back. He didn't even flinch. He simply looked at Rian, his cyan eyes dim. And then he released a pulse of pheromones. It wasn't a command to kneel. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Rian gasped, his grip faltering. His knees buckled, and he slumped forward, his forehead resting against Kalen's chest. His body betrayed him, melting at the proximity, seeking comfort from the very man he wanted to kill. This was the horror of the Enigma's mark. It turned an alpha's biology against them. "I cannot undo it," Kalen said, his voice strained. He didn't push Rian away. Instead, his hand came up, hesitantly hovering over Rian's back before resting there, grounding him. "And you wouldn't want me to. If the connection breaks now, the backlash would liquefy your nervous system." Rian shuddered, pulling himself back with a supreme effort of will. He leaned against the bedpost, breathing hard, hating the flush on his skin. You said I had to hold your curse. What is it?" Kalen walked to the window, looking out over the dystopian sprawl of Ebonreach. The city was a cage of neon and rain, surrounded by the wasteland Rian called home. "The Vance bloodline is not just powerful, Rian. It is infected. We call it the Shadow Blight." Kalen unbuttoned the cuff of his left sleeve and rolled it up. Rian stared. Kalen's arm was a roadmap of black veins, pulsating with a sickly, necrotic energy. The blackness was creeping up past his elbow, heading toward his heart. "It is a magical accumulation of toxins," Kalen explained, his tone clinical, detached. "Every Enigma in my family produces too much energy. Our bodies cannot contain it. Eventually, it consumes us. My father died screaming when the blight reached his brain. I have perhaps a month left." "So you used me as a battery?" Rian asked, his voice cold. "A trash can for your toxic magic?" "A filter," Kalen corrected, turning back to him. "An Omega would die instantly. A city-bred Alpha would shatter mentally. But a rogue, you have survived the wastes. Your genetic resistance is unparalleled. By marking you, I created a siphon. The mark draws the excess energy from me, filters it through your resilient system, and grounds it. And what do I get?" Rian laughed bitterly. "Besides a collar? You get to live," Kalen said. "The council, the men who hired your mercenary band to raid my supply lines, they planned to execute you the moment you were captured. They wanted a public spectacle. I claimed you instead. You saved me to use me." "I saved us both," Kalen said, his eyes flashing. "Is that not the way of the world? Usage? Transaction?" "No." Rian stood up, his legs shaking but holding. "In the wastelands, we fight for our pack. We die for our pack. We don't steal souls to save our own skins." "Then you are a better man than I," Kalen murmured. "But the deed is done. You are bound to me, Rian. And tonight, the council comes to inspect my prized." The logical leap why Kalen would risk marking a sworn enemy clicked into place for Rian. The council. They were the true power in Ebonreach. Kalen was a figurehead, powerful but isolated. By marking Rian, Kalen had technically made Rian his property, removing him from the council's jurisdiction. But he had also handed Rian the keys to his weakness. If I die, Rian said slowly, testing the theory. You die. Because the siphon breaks, and the backlash kills you. Kalen nodded once. Yes. Rian smirked. It was a feral, dangerous expression. Then it seems, Your Grace, that I am the one in charge. The days that followed were a blur of tension and confusing physiology. Rian was moved into Kalen's quarters permanently, ostensibly to keep the slave close, but in reality, because the physical distance caused both of them physical pain. Rian learned the layout of the spire. He learned that Kalen drank black tea with no sugar, that he slept only 4 hours a night, and that the black veins on his arm receded slightly every time they touched. It was infuriating. Rian wanted to hate him. He wanted to despise the aristocrat who lived in luxury while Rian's people starved in the wastes. But Kalen was not the tyrant Rian expected. He saw Kalen signing orders to divert grain to the lower districts, saw him refusing to increase taxes despite the council's pressure. He saw a lonely man dying by inches, desperately trying to keep his city from collapsing before the end. And the mark was a traitor. It made Rian hyper-aware of Kalen. When Kalen was stressed, Rian felt a headache. When Kalen was angry, Rian's blood boiled. And when Kalen looked at him with those sad, intense eyes, Rian felt a pull in his chest that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with a soul recognizing its match. The climax arrived 7 days later, during the grand ball meant to celebrate the winter solstice. Rian was forced to attend. He was dressed in a suit of black velvet that hugged his muscular frame, a stark contrast to his usual leather and armor. A silver collar, purely decorative, Kalen had insisted, though Rian hated it, rested against his throat, obscuring the mark. The ballroom was a sea of masks and deceit. The council members, old men with greedy eyes and rotting souls, circled them like vultures. High Counselor Dravos approached them. He was a man who smelled of sulfur and old perfume. Duke Vance? Dravos smiled, his teeth yellow. And his pet, remarkable. A rogue alpha, tamed. I assume he is fully broken. Kalen's hand tightened on Rian's shoulder. He is obedient, Counselor. That is all you need to know. Is he? Dravos stepped closer, invading Rian's personal space. He looks defiant. Perhaps a demonstration is in order? Command him to kneel. Let us see the Enigma's power. The room went silent. The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. If Kalen refused, it showed weakness. If he accepted, he humiliated Rian publicly, destroying the fragile truce they had built. Kalen looked at Rian. The bond flared open between them, a silent conversation. I'm sorry, Kalen's emotions whispered. I have to kneel, Kalen commanded, his voice laced with the Enigma's authority. It hit Rian like a physical blow. His knees trembled. Every instinct in his body screamed to submit, to drop, to bare his neck. But his pride, the rogue spirit that had kept him alive in the wastes, roared back. Rian didn't kneel. He stood there, shaking, sweat dripping down his temple, fighting the command with every ounce of strength he had. His nose began to bleed. Dravos laughed. Defective. You haven't broken him at all, Kalen. He is dangerous. Guards. The trap sprung. It hadn't been a test of loyalty. It was an assassination attempt. Guards in red armor poured from the side entrances, crossbows raised. They weren't aiming at Rian. They were aiming at Kalen. The Duke is compromised, Dravos shouted. He harbors a traitor. Kill them both. No, Rian shouted. The first bolt flew. Kalen moved, stepping in front of Rian. But he was weak. The blight, though receding, had left him drained. He raised a hand to deflect the bolt with a wave of telekinetic force, but he stumbled. Rian caught him, and in that moment the dynamic shifted. The mark on Rian's neck flared, glowing through the silver collar, melting the metal instantly. The energy that Kalen had been pouring into Rian, the toxicity, the power, the Enigma's essence, didn't just ground itself. It ignited. Rian's eyes, usually a warm hazel, flooded with a violet light. He wasn't just an alpha anymore. He was an alpha fueled by an Enigma's soul. "Get behind me," Rian growled. He didn't wait for Kalen to argue. Rian launched himself at the guards. He moved faster than humanly possible, a blur of violence. He tore the crossbow from the first guard's hands and used the stock to crush the helmet of the second. He was a whirlwind. The connection to Kalen fed him endless stamina. He felt Kalen's fear turn into awe, then into a surge of protective power that shielded Rian's back. They fought back to back. The Duke and the Rogue. The Enigma and his Alpha. When the last guard fell, and Dravos stood trembling with a dagger in his hand, Rian didn't kill him. He grabbed the counselor by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. "This city," Rian's voice was distorted, layered with a growl that shook the glass in the windows, "is under new management." He threw Dravos across the room. Rian turned to Kalen. The violet light faded from his eyes, leaving him exhausted, swaying on his feet. The adrenaline crash was instant. Kalen caught him again. But this time it wasn't the catch of a captor securing a prisoner. Kalen fell to his knees, lowering Rian gently to the floor, disregarding the blood on his pristine clothes. He ripped the hem of his shirt to press against a cut on Rian's forehead. "You fought for me?" Kalen whispered, his voice trembling. "Why?" Rian looked up, his vision blurry. He reached up, his hand staining Kalen's cheek with blood. The bond hummed between them, warm, golden, and finally, settled. The pain was gone. The blight on Kalen's arm had receded to almost nothing, burned away by Rian's rage. "Because," Rian wheezed, a lopsided grin forming on his face. "You're mine, Kalen, and nobody touches what belongs to me." Kalen froze. The Enigma, who had spent his life feared and isolated, looked at the rogue alpha who had just claimed him. Slowly, reverently, Kalen leaned down. He didn't use his voice to command. He didn't use his pheromones to force. "Then claim me," Kalen breathed. He kissed Rian, tasted of iron and victory. It was a seal deeper than the mark on Rian's neck. It was a promise. The curse was broken not by magic but by balance. The Enigma needed the Alpha not as a servant, but as a shield. And the Alpha needed the Enigma not as a master, but as a heart. And that is how the Viper tamed the wolf, only to find that the wolf had swallowed him whole. If you enjoyed seeing Rian take control and protect his Enigma, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a partner who marked you against your will if it meant saving their life? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,